Well, it certainly feels good to be back. Today we have two new fantastic albums released by, one by Alvvays and one by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. And perhaps the fact that these two albums have released on the same day has shaped a lot of my thoughts about both albums individually. But again, basically, King Gizzard are a very varied band, if you know them. They have very different musical styles between their albums, and so it is almost refreshing to return to a band like Alvvays, where a lot of what they do has been very consistent. Their style has sort of been very steady, although it has grown and developed, and that is something I will talk about very extensively during this first impressions video. But again, it is really nice just to hear that from a band rather than hearing something like King Gizzard where each album is different, and although they do advance their techniques and their sound, you don't stay long enough in one place to sort of really fully appreciate that. And I think again this is what makes this album quite special for me, is because I found it Alvvays in 2018, I believe, when I was at university, and so a lot of the stuff in especially Antisocialites I would listen to on the way back from uni. I remember listening to Plimsoll Punks on the bus every night, and I don't know, I find Alvvays as a band very special and very close to my heart. I do have a poster that I designed myself for Antisocialites on my wall, and also that. So if that doesn't say anything about my love for this band, then I don't know what will. Other than the fact that I saw them in Birmingham the other night, which was incredible. If you were there, leave a comment, honestly. But yeah, so again, this Alvvays have always been a very sort of jangly guitar, synth pop, and shoegaze band, and I would really like to explore sort of more of that as we go forward into this video. Again, this album starts with Pharmacy, which immediately delves further into shoegaze with guitar work from Alec that almost becomes really part of the synthesizer landscape, and that is something I will mention quite a lot here, is that the sort of jangly guitars and more defined guitars, I would say as well, are sort of lost in the mix for a lot of this album, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is just different. Which some people may not like. But anyway, we have Molly's vocals here that immediately are much louder than in previous albums, especially when compared to the first album, where you can't really often understand some of the words she's saying, especially with how she enunciates words. But here, again, you can really sort of glean from the songs what she's trying to get across, how she's singing it, that kind of thing. It is quite special, to be honest. But again, we have some really sort of fun, messy guitar, very fuzzy. And again, I saw this in Birmingham the other night, and Alec was just going ham, like doing ridiculous things down by the bridge and such, with delay effects and all this. And it's just like, I think it really highlights how he's sort of developed as a player in that sense. Again, we move into Easy on Your Own, which has been played live for quite a while now. Again, a lot of it describes sort of these themes of like education and how dull it can be. But I do think there is a sense of sort of beauty with a lot of these lyrics in the fact that they can be interpreted in very different ways depending on your personal background. Excuse me. And again, with that sort of nostalgic twist of Molly's past, especially considering her parents and her life in Canada. Again, there's always these sort of romantic musings on a lot of their songs, so I guess you could interpret also the Easy on Your Own thing as like ideas of breakup, that kind of thing as well. But again, I think something that pops out more on this album than previous ones is the quieter moments, and that is one thing that separates this from especially their first album, is just that sense of like dynamics in some places. But again, there is a lot of there's a few songs on this album that I really dislike for the idea that they don't really have that dynamic strength of some of the songs like Easier on Your Own, and especially songs like After the Earthquake, which sort of is reminiscent of their first album. It has that sort of like early to late 2000s indie work of like Vampire Weekend and Always as well. Um, and I really do just, I don't know, I just really like this song. It's got that sort of very static, sort of steady drum beat going on. And again, there is some really pertinent lyrics, especially related to, um, it feels like things like relationships. Things like "It Wasn't Built to Last" again resonates quite deeply here. Again, we have sort of fuzzy guitar parts that sort of help to bridge, especially a lot of the stuff in Antisocial Hides to this album. And again, this might be my favorite song on the album just for the fact that there is so much to give from this song. Again, Kerry's backing vocals here really complement Molly's as always, but some of that is lost again as I've mentioned, and a lot personally I thought of that was lost during their live performance as well, because the sort of guitars and synthesizers were loud, and Sheridan's drumming was just like on fire. So it was kind of hard to really grasp that sort of individuality of every part of the instrumentation in the live setting, especially, and some of that is lost on the album as well, despite being obviously clearer and such. But again, I did complain a lot in the early singles, such as Pharmacy, where a lot of that sort of dynamics was lost. And again, this is why I really do like the song, because there's just a lot more of that here. Again, I think I'll probably complain, or not complain, but comment more on that in this next song, and that's Tom Verlaine, which does enter with some sort of haunting vocals and this sort of like tremoloed guitar, the tremolo arm rather than the effect. But and again, that is reminiscent of sort of more of their second album, where the guitars are a lot sort of heavier and perhaps a bit wilder in some places. Again, I think this song does highlight that direction towards shoegaze, but also drives home the point that Molly's vocals are far more present in this album, in parts, which really helps again to discern what she's saying upon a first listen, and also just to help make the songs feel more punchy, because I think although I say a lot, although I've been saying a lot in this review about sort of things being lost, I think in especially their first album, where the production is quite sort of like cloudy, I would describe it as, a lot of things are lost in that. Again, some really great guitar and synthesizer work, but and Molly's vocals, especially the backing, is lost a little bit here. Just moving on to Pressed, again brings back those jangly guitars and thundering drums, to be quite honest, which brings a really fast-paced song to the album, which does break it up, because I think in some cases, as much as sort of the tone of songs and instrumentation is important, I think also the tempo is very important. So bringing something in that changes that tempo a little bit is quite exciting. And again, you can hear backing vocals a little bit better, and Molly's absolutely just belting it here, creating a very sort of punchy song with those tongue-in-cheek, tactful lyrics, as always. I'm saying always a lot, which is quite funny, but... and again, despite being only 2 minutes, the song sort of packs in a lot of dynamics and really drives home the effort and production of this album. Like, you can tell there is a lot of love put into this, whether you like it or not, which I would say I definitely like this album, because it's always, even though I'm biased because I like the band, I still think it's a good album. But yeah, moving into Many Mirrors, this starts with sort of this haunting synthesizer line and slightly more roughed up guitars in places. I did hear this one live, excuse me, and I think something that was lost on perhaps a lot of audience members was the fact that they didn't really introduce the new songs by name, and especially when you've got these like very loud guitar and synthesizer parts and the drums are going off, it's like you can't often discern the key lyrical line from the song to work out which song it is, which I don't know. But again, this one definitely gives us sort of those Elastica vibes, and especially, I don't know, I guess songs like Crash from the Primitives and stuff. again, especially in the delivery of Molly's vocals and some of the bass line parts, how that progresses between the different sections, and just some of the chord changes there. Again, I think really some excellent guitar work by Alec in the later sections that does highlight his sort of growth as a player. Finally, moving on to Very Online Guy, which was another single just recently released. As I said during my first impressions, I think the bass line here is really good. It's very punchy, sort of reminiscent of things like Hey and other songs such as that. And I think just the delivery and the effects on the vocals really help to drive home the feel of the song. And I will retain the idea that it sounds like a Blondie song, although hearing it live and sort of listening to it quite a lot since it came out, it really does sort of drive home that sense that this is a very, very well crafted song with very, very strong ideas, especially about, internet culture and things like that. And the musical element of that, the instrumentation, really does complement those ideas and vocals. Again, I think this does feel a lot more distinct compared to songs like Many Mirrors and Tom Verlaine, which again is my problem with this album, is that, well, it's not so much as a problem because it does bring out a lot of these more exciting songs, but the more boring songs on the album sometimes feel out of place. But again, they kind of serve to make the other songs stand out more, which may be a good thing. Again, I think this highlights a sort of stronger progression towards that shoegaze sound, and I think it would be interesting, assuming they release another album, to see where they go forward with that, because I think they're at a point where they could go deeper with that and keep going, but I think in some ways a lot of the charm from their previous two albums would be lost if they kept plunging deeper into that shoegaze sort of element. So I would be interested to see where they go next, which is something I'll say a little bit later as well. Again, I do adore this song, so much of the complaining I've given about that shoegaze sound doesn't really apply to this one. But moving into Velveteen starts with, again, haunting sort of delayed vocals, which seems to be something more present on this album than previous work. Obviously, we had things like Forget About Life, which is very sort of vocal heavy in that sense. And so it's nice really to hear sort of the quieter moments from Molly, and I think probably that could be something they explore more deeply in future work, but we'll see. Again, I really do like the drums and keyboards here, helping to craft sort of a more synth pop feel of sort of an 80s song, especially with the sort of drums especially, sorry. Again, I think there's a nice section around 2 minutes with the guitar line, synthesized, and Molly's hushed vocals. Again, really highlights the dynamics and how that can help to make or break a song on this album for many people, I would say. Again, the high vocal at the end really drives home that point of that 80s feel, and also highlights just how big of a range Molly has in terms of vocals. But moving on to Tile by Tile, it starts beautifully with, again, sort of that synth pop drum machine kind of feel. It also has sort of this very open feel and doesn't feel bogged down by, again, the heavy and messy synthesizers. Although this does come in at the end, which doesn't feel annoying in that sense, because it's like, it's refreshing and it feels like you've earned it in some way and you've built up to it, rather than just being hammered straight in, like songs like Pharmacy and such, where literally within 20 seconds you're plunged into this soundscape. But I think in this case it really does work. And yeah, but moving forward into Pomeranian Spinster, I think this was one of the songs that I was looking forward to the most, just by name alone, and immediately gives off similar vibes to Hey, and again, more Elastica stuff. I also just want to highlight again Sheridan's drum work. I saw her playing live, obviously, and just the way she hammers the drums are pretty incredible. Like, I don't know, might be my new favorite member of the band, other than Molly and Alec. I should also mention that they do have a new bass player replacing Brian, and that is Abby, who I believe was a roommate of Sheridan's. And I'll probably describe more about that when I do my Story of Always Part 2, coming soon. But yeah, I think she's also a very good bass player. Doesn't quite have that presence live, but I don't think Brian was particularly, I don't know, a showman. I don't know. It's a shoegaze band. You can't expect them to be jumping around. But yeah, I think the punchy vocals in time with the drums here really does drive that song along. There's also a section around 2 minutes where the bass line is really clear and punchy, which I love. You guys all know that I do. Well, I hope you know that I do bass covers. I will be doing a full bass cover of this album, but it's just nice to hear some punchy bass. Like, that's all I can say. Again, it's another song charged of energy and sort of that dynamicism that really pushes the boundaries of their sound as a band, especially linked with those fuzzy guitars again. This is another song that suffers from that synth and noise guitar blend, and that is Belinda Says, but I think there is enough dynamics to get the song going in a good direction, especially with the sort of quiet section. And I seriously think that, again, going back to the idea that a lot of these songs are sort of crafted around little worlds in Molly's imagination, characters, and but still relating to experiences that she's had. I think this song especially stands out as one with a lot of weight because the album cover is, of course, I would assume, picturing Molly's parents and Molly as a child. And so this song, where it's on about somebody moving to the country and having a child, is very pertinent, and it almost feels like they are writing about Molly is writing about her parents. And again, this is especially more tragic considering the death of her parents when she was young. And so I would say that a lot of that experience did play into this song especially, and although I'm yet to fully read the lyrics of this album, I would say a lot of these sort of experiences are playing into this album, as has been common with a lot of, well, there are other two albums where sort of there's these very personal lyrics. Anyway, yeah, I think really this is a good song. I love the quiet moments, and seeing this live just gave me chills. What more is there to say? I would say the next song, though, Bored in Bristol, is very sinister in some ways because it's quite creepy at the start with the sort of this synth line that is which we saw some months back when they teased the album, and just the way it sounds is quite creepy, but it does open up into this sort of like reggae, happy, poppy bass line, and again that drum machine feel. I do like this song just based off the vibes alone, and the fact that these vibes are so different from a lot of the other songs in the album. And again, it's just something that's different. Like, I like the variation away from that heavy sort of shoegaze sound in this song. Excuse me. Yeah, I would also say it's very similar to Not My Baby, but at this point in the album, I was getting quite sad because I'd realised it had been 5 years since we've got an Alvvays album, and so at the penultimate song, I was like, kind of wanting more, and I'm not sure whether that's just the sort of perhaps selfish desire to just hear more and more and more of their work, but I think it's good that it leaves you wanting more at this point, because it's like, you wouldn't want to be feeling like, oh, this is it, this is the end of Alvvays, which of course it's not, but I hope it's not anyway, because the band are as strong as ever. And yeah, I think Lottery Noises, which again is the penultimate song, brings that sort of point home with, again, these haunting vocals that actually brought a tear to my eye at this point with all these thoughts in mind. Again, the heavy guitar and drums swiftly return, which kind of breaks you away from that feeling in almost a bittersweet way, which probably is the intention and is sort of something that is quite common across their work. Again, there's some almost like angelical vocals at 1 minute 40, which make me crave sort of those more defined harmonies. Like, you can hear Molly's vocals sort of working alongside the synthesizers, which are already in harmony, to create this sort of like amazing harmony that once again brings me back to Wolf Alice's Blue Weekend, which I mentioned previously. And I think really, obviously, Ellie, the singer of for Wolf Alice, sort of has this very strong voice and idea for harmonies in her songs. And so I kind of just want to hear that more because, like, again, a lot of the vocals are lost in some of their songs, and especially in live performances. So I would really like to hear, you know, these incredible singers, for all things considered, working together to build some sort of harmony that isn't obstructed by the instrumentation as much. Like, I know there is some songs in previous albums that really do have that, and there is some places in this album, especially in the sort of quieter moments, that do have that. But I think in some cases, just the fact that all these voices kind of interlock very well, especially Molly and Kerry, and even Sheridan coming in, it's like, I just wish there was more of that. And obviously, these are two different bands. Wolf Alice and Alvvays are very different bands in terms of their style and where they fit in the world. But I just would like to hear that more. Anyway, this song comes to a crescendo, and we reach the last song on the album, Fourth Figure. I almost feel like this song perhaps was a little bit of a waste. It's hauntingly short, and somehow reminded me of God Save the Queen from Queen's A Night at the Opera, just in the sort of melody and also just where it fits. And of course, it's a very short track that closes the album in a way that doesn't really bookend the album as strongly as songs like Red Planet or Forget About Life. I think they were much stronger contenders for album finishers, especially Forget About Life, which again sort of leads you down this sad path, but then leaves you wanting more still. But yeah, overall, I think this album is good, like very, very good. And there is some standouts on the album, like Easy on Your Own, Very Online Guy, After the Earthquake, Bored in Bristol, as well. But I think with songs such as Tom Verlaine, that sort of sense of dynamics from the previous two albums is lost in places. But despite this, I think Molly's quieter sort of solo vocals pop through in a lot of places, and that is something that really gives this album the one-up on their previous work, and sort of advances their direction as a band, sort of with this heavier idea of guitar work, stronger vocals especially, and I don't know, just the sound in general is, I would say, more mature. I'd still think they need to look at breaking up those more muddy, cloudier songs a little bit more. But again, that's kind of the vibe of shoegaze. So I think in some cases, that's just how it is. But I don't think it's bad. I just think it's like different, perhaps. Again, I found Alvvays after their second album, and so I'm probably biased towards liking the sounds of those albums with the sort of more defined guitar and bass. And so I think immediately I've gone into this album looking for those sounds, like wanting things like Next of Kin and Adult Diversion with sort of the surfy guitar kind of sound. And I haven't found that as much as I would have liked, but I think all things considered, it is a stunning album, but one that I find myself a little bit lost upon in places. As like, I feel like I'm searching for my own nostalgia, perhaps, but also the nostalgia that the band put into a lot of their previous two albums. And again, I don't know. I think in contrast to this, those albums came out 8 and 5 years ago, which is a very long time. Like, if you consider the band's personal lives, how that they must have changed. Obviously, this band is very quiet in that front to an extent, and so it's like, it's very easy to say from my perspective that this album sounds different, but you know, that's going to be obvious because it's been a very long time since their previous work. Again, going back to King Gizzard, they're releasing 3 albums this month, and a lot of it kind of gets lost as well because it's just boring. Sorry, King Gizzard fans, but I just think like you need that time to grow, and some of that obviously comes from putting out music and seeing what people like, but some of that is also just like again, I would say, especially with this album, it's changes in what music you're listening to, changes in your own lives that affect the lyrics, that affect what kind of music you craft from those lyrics. And I think that is definitely probably the biggest point to make here, is that it's just been a long time since the last Alvvays album, and that if you are a fan from either their first album or when the second album came out, you're going to be looking for those sounds in this album, I would say. But again, as a fan of the band, as a fan of Molly singing and Alex's guitar and the bass, which despite having a new bass player is still very consistent in its sound, the drums again, which I'll say are fantastic, and Kerry on keyboards and vocals, I just think that if you want more Alvvays, this is it. This is the album. This is a good album. Like, there's nothing more I can say, but it is different in some senses, but it's also still Alvvays because it's still got the tongue-in-cheek vocals and all the things that I've mentioned previously. Again, I don't know. I think you might overlook some of these things if you are just like a true diehard fan, but in some cases I like to be a little more critical about these things. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, I don't know. But again, I think really to summarize the point, your view of any band's material will be shaped by what music they released at the time, and so anything new again will be a bit jarring at first. But for those like myself who are perhaps a bit dissuaded by the stronger shoegaze influence of this album, I think it might be easier to love it after a few listens. Again, I'm already liking Pharmacy a lot more, and such. But I think after all, this is a first impressions video, and that like it's not supposed to be a comprehensive review of every element of the song of the album. It's just what I think immediately after listening to it this morning. But yeah, that's my take. Personally, I think Alvvays have crafted another stunning addition to their catalogue of music. There is a lot of things that are different here, and a lot of things that they've grown upon from previous albums, such as their I don't know, I guess the more strong... sorry, I'm running out of words. This is a very long video, but again, they're pushing the sounds, they're pushing the guitar work, they're pushing how present the vocals are, and the harmonies, and the drum work, and the bass lines, and just everything is pushing the band forward. And maybe that's meaningful to you, maybe that's not. Maybe you like that new sort of sound that they're giving off with this album, because it is, although quite similar to previous stuff, it is very different. Whether you like that or not, that is your choice. I do like this album, all things considered. I just think it's a bit of something different compared to what we've been listening to for the past 5-8 years. But who knows? But again, I think that's enough from me, because I am actually running out of breath now. What do you guys think of the album? Because again, the reaction live I thought was very strong. I thought the band are as excellent, as sonically capable as ever. And I just want to know what your guys and gals and everybody in between's thoughts are on this album, and especially what is your favourite song. I still think it's going to have to be After the Earthquake, because of just how good it is. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in my review. Sorry, I'm really losing the plot here, aren't I? I will see you guys in my full cover on the bass guitar, and hopefully electric guitar at some point, of this album. Peace.